Back here on CBS Sports HQ. All right, we're heading into week 5 of college football, and we have a ton of very exciting, some ranked on ranked matchups, really matchups that have CFP implications. We got Oregon and Penn State. Is this the year where Penn State and James Franklin can finally prove that they are there for the big moment, that we have an all SEC ranked on ranked matchup with Bama and Georgia? Georgia looks rock solid, except for when it comes to Bama, historically speaking, right? And then we're keeping it within the SEC with LSU and Ole Miss, and then Ohio State and Washington, where we kind of feel like the spread should have been a little bit bigger for the defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, but we're going to get into it right now as we have a lot of exciting matchups for week 5 in college football. So let's welcome in our analysts here, and Shehan Jeyarajah and Brad Crawford. Gentlemen, want to talk about Ohio State first, because sort of wondering, maybe are they on upset alert? A little factoid here. This is the 3rd shortest spread favored by a number 1 team versus an unranked team in the past 30 years. Shehan, should we look into that, or is it like just numbers are numbers and we're maybe just trying to find a fault with this Ohio State team?
Well, Vegas is rarely wrong, to be frank, and I think that this Washington team is really interesting coming into this matchup for a couple of reasons. One, Damon Williams is probably the best quarterback that no one is talking about. He was electric in their win over Washington State last week and has been pretty much perfect through the first 4 games of the year. So I think he's going to legitimately be able to cause Ohio State's defense some problems. And also defensively, this Washington team is a little further along than people realize. Now, I will say they were down their top cornerback Takario Davis last week against Washington State, and he's questionable coming into this game, and that's not ideal going against a receiving core of the quality of Ohio State's. But this Washington team is high powered, they're explosive, they can put up points in a hurry. I think that this is just about as big a challenge that Ohio State has faced defensively, not just to this point, but I think going back even into the college football playoff last year.
This almost feels like a sucker bet a little bit at 8.5 points. Like you said, Shehan, Vegas usually isn't wrong. They're just kind of daring us to take Washington in a possible close game. I just don't know. It is Julian Saban's first road start. Ohio State's had extra time to prepare. By the way, Ryan Day is 6-0 at Ohio State with coming off a bye week, and he's 48-0 against Big Ten opponents not named Michigan or Oregon. So Ohio State does not get upset under Ryan Day as long as he's not playing one of those 2 chief rivals. I think it'll be a very explosive game, a lot of big plays on both sides of the ball. Jeremiah Smith might have his Heisman coming out party type game on Saturday afternoon. But I do think Ohio State will go on the road, play well in this one. You see Jeremiah Smith's numbers there. He's been a little quiet, but he's still put up pretty good numbers these last couple of weeks. So this is Washington, their toughest defensive assignment of the season. You can see number 4 get a lot of targets early in that game.
Yeah, and speaking of Jeremiah Smith, man, if he has some good Heisman moments with the quarterbacks that were getting a lot of buzz in the offseason kind of falling short, it's certainly very, very possible for Jeremiah Smith to go in there and win the Heisman as a non-quarterback. All right, let's get to Oregon and Penn State, because Oregon seemingly is playing with like a chip on their shoulder because of what happened in the CFP last season. And then for James Franklin, even Drew Aller and Penn State, we keep looking at the records for how they perform against AP top 5 teams, top 6 teams versus unranked teams, right? So, Shehan, a 2-part question for you. What would a Penn State win mean for the Nittany Lions? Would it silence all of those haters talking about them showing up in the big moments? And then what about a loss for Oregon and their CFP resume?
Well, I mean, you mentioned those stats. It's 14 straight losses to AP top 6 opponents since James Franklin has been at Penn State. That's a crazy run, a crazy number, and frankly unacceptable for the quality of program that this has been. So absolutely, a win in this game changes the narrative. On top of that, I think that there's a really good case that winning this game would push Penn State to maybe being the favorite to win the national championship. You look back at the last 2 years, right? It's 2023 Michigan, 2024 Ohio State. They were rosters that were talented, that had recruited well over the course of multiple years, and they were defined by the fact that they brought back guys who could be in the NFL right now. Penn State is that team in 2025, but there's that little piece there that is in the back of your mind saying, well, can Penn State and James Franklin win the big one? This is their big opportunity. You know, for Oregon, I think that they have been as close to a perfect football team as you could possibly be through 4 games. They're winning on offense, on defense, they're running the ball at a high level, they're passing the ball at a high level. They're doing just about everything you can ask. But, this is as tough a challenge as they're going to have in 2025, going on the road in that whiteout environment where Penn State has won a bunch of those in a row straight. I think that for them to really establish themselves again as a true national contender, this is the kind of game that you go in and win.
And you know what? It's funny, we're talking about the stakes, but Oregon was pretty perfect in the regular season last year, and all we talk about is that CFP performance, so it really matters how you finish, right? Brad, we're going to kind of flip things for you. We want to know if Oregon and Dan Lanning's squad, if they win and they beat Penn State, what is that going to do for their CFP resume? And then also on the flip side for the Nittany Lions, what kind of fallout is there going to be if they don't show up in this big moment here and they do lose and come up short?
Yeah, I think if Oregon goes on the road and wins in Happy Valley Saturday night, then the Ducks are almost assuredly going to get a top 4 playoff seed. They still might not win the Big Ten, but there's only 2 ranked opponents left on the schedule. It's Indiana and USC, and Oregon gets both of those at home. So we are probably talking about Dan Lanning going 12-0 in the regular season again if the Ducks can go on the road and beat a top 5 Penn State team. And then on the flip side of that, Penn State still has 2 games left against ranked teams as well, but the Nittany Lions have to go to Ohio State for one of those games, while Oregon, like I said, plays Indiana and USC both at home. So the schedule moving forward for both these teams, Penn State has a tougher road to Indianapolis and getting to a potential top 4 seed, while Oregon, if they're able to beat the Nittany Lions Saturday night, it's smooth sailing from here.
22 straight regular season games. That is absolutely insane. All right, let's move it along to this ranked on ranked all SEC matchup with Bama and Georgia here. Bama has been kind of shaky since week 1, right? We saw that against FSU, but it feels like it doesn't matter against Georgia. Like they just own Georgia, historically speaking. So, Shehan, how much would a win over UGA boost Bama's resume? Because they kind of need that after that week 1 performance, right? That's always going to stick out there to the voters. And then what would that do for the Dogs and their CFP hopes if they lose?
This is, to me, a must-win opportunity for Kalen DeBoer and the Alabama Crimson Tide. Historically, they've done a better job of punching up during their time at Alabama and Washington than taking care of business. And this is one of those games where you expect Alabama's going to come out and have a little something extra prepared. Since that Florida State game, they've played really, really solid football. Ty Simpson has settled in. That receiving group looks like what it was expected to be, one of the best in the country. And I think that they certainly have the personnel in order to pull a major upset. So this is a game where I think that Alabama's going to come out at their absolute best. And for Georgia, look, through the first couple of games, it's been a little up and down for Gunnar Stockton, but similarly, he's starting to find his footing. I think for them, it would be a damper to lose a game like this, to go and play Alabama and lose against them for the 2nd year in a row. You mentioned Kirby Smart's struggles against Alabama. He's only beaten Alabama 1 time, and that was in the 2021 National Championship game. Since then, he hasn't managed to pull it off again. They've managed to miss Alabama a number of times during their run to 2 national championships and a couple of SEC titles. But if you lose this game, I think, again, it sort of says Georgia is moving back to the pack of the SEC. They've lorded above everybody else for most of the past couple of years. I think that this is the kind of game where you either put up or shut up.
All right. Straightforward there, Shehan. I mean, hey, they're 1-6 against Bama since 2017. We saw it on the graphic there. Brad, you have Georgia as the best team in the SEC, which can arguably, depending on who you ask, be the best conference in college football. So if they win this game, how much does that really push them and solidify them as the #1 team in one of the most competitive conferences in the country? And then also, what's that going to do for Bama if they lose in their CFP hopes when they already have, a week 1 loss that we're not going to forget about?
Yeah, I'll go second half of that question first. I mean, in the playoff picture, Shehan's right. This game means absolutely more to Alabama than it does Georgia Saturday night. Georgia's won 33 straight home games. But look, the last 2 weeks, Alabama's looked great against ULM and Wisconsin, but we saw how they looked in week 1. A lot of us sold our stock on Kalen DeBoer. If you want to buy some of that back before Saturday, you've got a chance. But that's going to be a tough game between the heads for the Crimson Tide. And Alabama still has to play 5 top 20 teams after this weekend. So if Bama loses in week 5, starts 2-2, I don't think winning out is going to be a possibility for Kalen DeBoer. And 10 wins, I've said it several times the last few weeks, I think that is the magic number to make the playoff as an at-large SEC team. And then you look at Georgia. I mean, they've got home field to defend. Shehan mentioned the losing streak and, 1-6 for Kirby Smart against Alabama. If you can't beat this Alabama team, you're probably not going to beat Bama.
It's certainly not the Alabama of yore with Nick Saban that we're used to talking about, right? Let's go to another ranked on ranked all SEC matchup with LSU and Ole Miss. If you were on X, there's been some very entertaining content surrounding Lane Kiffin and this matchup, of course. I won't get into it, but Shehan, give us the impact of LSU if they win here, because yes, they're undefeated right now, but it just something doesn't feel right. And then also get to Ole Miss in a loss. What would that do for them?
Well, I think a lot of the time when a coach goes on a rant after a game, it's because they know something is wrong. And this LSU offense, since that opening game, has not looked like one of the best in the country. They brought back who was my consensus quarterback one, Garrett Nussmeier, entering the year. They brought in a great wide receiver group. They've got talented running backs. But this has been a unit that has not managed to put up good points against good opponents. You look at that graphic right there, 23 points against Louisiana Tech. The 20 points against Florida were aided by a defensive touchdown, so they really only scored 13 offensive points against Florida. This is a unit that I think has to show up in a game like Ole Miss. You look at what Ole Miss is doing right now. I mean, Trinidad Chambliss has been an absolute revelation for them at the quarterback position, and they're going to put up points even against one of the best secondaries in the country that LSU has. So this is a moment where I think that LSU also establishes itself either as a legitimate national title contender, or they're kind of a one-hit wonder against the Clemson team that frankly has fallen apart since that week one game.
Yeah, it felt like there was a lot of buzz around Clemson, around Florida, and then as LSU is picking up those wins, it's like, I don't know if LSU is that good or Clemson and Florida are just that bad and we were just that wrong. Brett, if the Rebs go through, they win this game, how much does that boost their resume in terms of the CFP, considering what we just talked about with LSU, where we kind of don't really know if they are the best version of themselves, and what a loss ultimately mean for LSU?
I think if Ole Miss wins this game, they're probably going to be one of the 3 or 4 playoff teams from the SEC. I mean, you look at the rest of the slate, this might be the toughest game left, and Ole Miss gets LSU at home. Now, Brian Kelly, he's got plenty of bulletin board material. He's a 2-point underdog. Everybody's, downing his 4-0 team despite a couple of good wins. You see the Ole Miss schedule there. The rest of the slate's manageable because they only play Georgia and Oklahoma. So if you beat LSU and you split the Bulldogs and Sooners coming up, then that's an 11-1 finish, regardless if that's good enough to get to the SEC championship game or not. And oh, by the way, Ole Miss's non-conference win against Tulane, that looks better than the one LSU has right now at Clemson, and none of us thought that'd be the case 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, no way. We were like hyping that up, the Battle of Death Valley. It's amazing. And now, 4 or 5 weeks in, it doesn't hit the same. Shehan, Brad, we certainly appreciate it going through all of these incredible matchups that we have to look forward to in week 5 of college football. And of course, the CFP implications that could be on the line as well. You are getting a look at week 5, the CBS and CBS Sports Network college football slate. We talked about Ohio State and Washington. Make sure you check that out. That is Saturday, 3:30 Eastern time on CBS.